Hi there and welcome to the first Blue Envelope podcast 10-minute draft. This card can be quite exquisite in the right deck, but Languish is just better. I might table that Cruel Revival if I'm lucky. This card's worse than it looks. This card's better than it looks. That card's fine. That card's fine. That card's fine. That card's fine. Yeah, you'd better believe it. There are a couple of fine cards in this pack, but nothing in the pack makes you want to stray from black. As a wise man once said, eat fruit and veg, drink water, and draft card advantage. This card's fine, but too temporary for what I want, and Mama always said, don't pick your scabs, but here I might just make an exception. The Owl is fine, but nothing to hoot home about, and Maritime Guide is pretty much exactly what I want at this point. An unexciting thick pick is a perfect place to pick one up, and the second one. I'm not sure if this implies black is open, but I want to take the better card, of course. I could go 100% on courses and 2 picks here, but a Rusty Air Elemental seems the better finisher. And here are some other cards that I picked up that you probably won't catch because you're too slow. Pick up the pace, yeah? My second pack is about as unexciting as it gets, and the only spell I can really consider is a fatter than average bear. I really like the lands with effect, so I console myself with that and hope better stuff comes around. It looks like I might have to wait a little longer though. I take the flyer even though it's not all that. I've heard good things about this card, but it might get passed around and come back, and I need 2 drops. I could go into depth on this pick, but I'll give you the bridged version. I'd take the Shaman. Is this card following me around, or is that just my shadow? It'll table with 2 in quick succession, and I'm pretty sure I didn't see that watercourse from the pack. I think Aeronaut's underrated, but it's not as inspiring as it is aspiring. I'm worried about too many 4-drops, so disperse it is. I can kind of feel the draft walking away from me at this point, but I figure if the 0-6 is in my board, it won't be on my record sheet. Maybe the draft is back on course. Not sure what this does, but it's a rare, so it's probably good. Also not sure what this does, and this card is basically Cryptic Command, so I'll make no bones about it. Do the other drafters have no glove for this card? Oh, nice combo with my Foundry. Called it. Do people have no respect for foils? Yeah, nice first pick. Well, we know where the black drafters are in this draft. Hope that tables. Well, this pack doesn't leave me much choice. I think this card's a trap, kind of overrated. Not much in the pack, but I took a Husk. An Evolving Wilds would be nice, but I don't really need it, and 2 drops are impeccable. I'm not sure what possessed people to pass this so late. I guess no one else is blue-black. This guy always seems so full of promise, but he never quite makes a cult in my deck. It's 5 drops ahoy, but I am not unwholly happy to pick up this card. Well, I guess red was open. I've heard good things about this card, but, well, 5 drops. Definitely summon for the board. Here's a card I won't play. And another one. And another one. Leave my Sentinel out of this. Slug. Now comes a classic moment of realising you have 21 playables and debating whether you want a Tormenting Voice, a Catacomb Slug, or a Negate in your main deck. Or maybe an overpowered blue card like Nymphic's Barrier or Bone to Ash. Ringwarden in the Owl is fine, but probably my worst fire drop. Conditional counterspell it is. Thankfully Foundry is a spell in disguise, so we're good to go with 18 lands. So, first match, game 1. I kept a hand that's a little bit sketchy on the draw, and a turn 1 Caterpillar from my opponent suggests it's probably going to be a long day. To be honest, not a whole lot happens in the first few turns, other than my opponent building up some kind of 1-1 army and then deciding to counter my turn 3 Husk of what appears to be a blue splash in his or her green-white mono 1-1 aggro deck. Once we both start playing 4-drops though, the board gums up a bit until they find a flyer to start chipping away at my life total. Fast forward a few turns, and kind of looks like there's an Alpha Strike incoming. I make the obvious blocks, but a follow-up Spider, the old 1-4 for 3, leaves me hanging in the game by a rather delicate thread. Possess Gab to return a removal spell, and a 1-3 on D buys me a little bit of time, but then my opponent decides to go for the most underwhelming of all waves. I figure I might be able to get back in the game with some good blocking and a negate in hand, but then Gaia's Revenge. Negate comes out against the 3-colour Caterpillar aggro deck, and a touch of Moonglove comes in to deal with their one good creature. It's another sketchy keep with a soul card with converted mana cost of less than 5, but I figure if they make a turn 1 Caterpillar, I'm all set for the game. I draw the nuts turn 2 and start smashing in for a mighty 1 point of flying a turn while keeping their team in check. Fast forward and they're playing a 6-drop into my Slayer of Eyeblights. We know where this one's going. Despite my best efforts at misplay into Oblivion, I win a few turns later. On to game 3, and I actually keep a decent hand for a change. Unfortunately no Caterpillar to mock my Maritime Guard, but a Shambling Ghoul gives me a better 2-drop anyway. I decide not to attack into the world's most obvious Krasis, and then instead just play a 3-drop and pass. Reef deals with the Krasis, and for some reason I decide they probably have another one, so the Ghoul stays on D again. Empath reveals a forest and gives me something to safely attack into. They make the trade and pitch a Clash of Wills, maybe an indication of their current state of mind as a result of losing to Maritime Guard beatdown. A Centaur is annoying, but nothing my 3-2 can't attack into, especially with the potential of 2 Scry triggers lurking behind the block. Timpact Wolf doesn't do much to impact the board, and I figure dispersing a blocker to force through some damage can only go well with shadows in play. I scry a couple of lands to the bottom, and a few turns later manage to successfully grind them out with advantage. Round 2 begins, and the Nemesis is back, the thriller from Manila, the Caustic Caterpillar. There's actually a direct correlation in this draft so far between games I lose and games my opponent leads with turn 1 Caterpillar. I rip the Imp to deal with yet another growing 1-1 army, but that gets promptly dispatched. Thankfully, I'm still very lucky and draw a much better card. Hey look, they're 3-colour aggro too. Did I miss a memo somewhere? Rock Smaller provides a potential problem, but watercourses are enough to keep them at bay, assuming there are no pump spells, which is a safe assumption considering there's no attack. Not much happens until a few turns later where I Alpha Strike, and my opponent shows a Titan strength before promptly conceding. Thanks. I decide it's finally time for my Sentinel to hit the board in the face of the Caterpillar onslaught. For some reason I decided to sub out my finisher for a 0-4. It's another decent keep for game 2, and Vindication for boarding out the Sentinel. Watercourse is a decent draw, especially as my opponent isn't doing a lot. Take a biff off the Caterpillar, and just drop the Watercourser. Is that a swamp? My opponent still isn't doing anything on turn 3 and tries to trade a Titan Strength for a Courser. I'm not so keen on that trade, so a Disperse sends it back into his hand and lets me stay on the board, when I then eat his Rhino next turn. And keep swinging with the Courser. The notorious BUG is back, accompanied by an equally underwhelming 2-4. That actually gives me a Reef Soul target at long last, and I snap up the opportunity before they load me with another tempting Caterpillar target. Deadbridge isn't doing very much at this point, so I figure I'd better just attack for as much as possible and bolster the team with a flyer. They Wild Instincts my Imp over my Courser the turn after, which probably should have been a clue as to what was to come. Something that would rather not meddle with a Death Shot flyer, and yep, it's big. Still, I'm just about ahead on the board and the race, but a turn later they have Titanic Growth to swing in and take the game. Game 3, and I have to mulligan into a hand that's risky at best and flat out awful the other 99% of the time. I probably should have gone to 5 considering my opponent starts with the Onslaught early and the relentless barrage of Caterpillars. I do draw the Swamp turn 2, but it's not worth running Shadows into Caterpillar, as that Languish will hopefully deal with it. And thankfully it looks like my luck might be turning up, as I managed to trade my 23rd card for their 23rd card. The Caterpillar might actually become a threat once it doubles in size. Deadbridge is fine on turn 3, and although it's pretty bad to play out guys, I figure I can't rely on the Swamp coming off the top. Turns out the Swamp was a lot further than I hoped for, and my opponent managed to build an incremental advantage before I managed to hit the reset button, frustratingly with no untapped black source for the Shadows. They still have 4 cards in hand, and the follow-up is probably the worst thing you want to see when you've got 2 mulligans in hand. And, yeah, the game didn't really last much longer after that. They attack, I take the damage, draw a land, and GG. Thanks for watching, and check out the podcast, tbepodcast.com. Links in the description.